हरे कृष्ण प्रभु. हरे कृष्ण प्रभु. ಸೌಂಡ್ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. हरे कृष्ण प्रभु जी.
हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे. हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे. हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे. हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे. हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण. जय राधा नील माधव राधा नील माधव राधे. जय पंचतत्व जय पंचतत्व जय पंचतत्व जय पंचतत्व. जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय प्रभुपाद. एवं विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तरशत श्री श्रीमद श्रीवान ग्रेस अभय चरणारविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी महाराज श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय. इस्कॉन फाउंडर आचार्य पीपीटी फाउंडर आचार्य शेर सेवर होल वर्ल्ड जगत गुरु श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय. ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय. निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे. हरि हरि बोल. ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudhirayet Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, 18th chapter, text number 33. Aho adharmah palanam pivnam balibhujamiva swaminyagam yaddasanam dvarapanam shunamiva. Aho adharmah palanam pivnam balibhujamiva swaminyagam yaddasanam dvarapanam shunamiva. Aho adharmah palanam pivnam balibhujamiva swaminyagam yaddasanam dvarapanam shunamiva. Pivnam balibhujamiva swaminyagam yaddasanam dvarapanam shunamiva. Aho adharmah palanam pivnam balibhujamiva swaminyagam yaddasanam dvarapanam shunamiva. Word to word meaning, aho, just look at, adharmaha, irreligion, palanam, of the rulers, pivnam, of one who is brought up, balibhujam, like the crows, iva, like swamini, unto the master, agham, sin, yat, what is, dasanam, of the servants, dvarapanam, keeping watch at the door, shunam, of the dogs, iva, like. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Translation. The Brahmana's son Shringi said, oh, just look at the sins of the rulers who, like crows and watchdogs at the door, perpetrate sins against their masters, contrary to the principles governing servants. Purport. The Brahmanas are considered to be the head and brains of the social body, and the Kshatriyas are considered to be the arms of the social body. The arms are required to protect the body from all harm, but the arms must act according to the directions of the head and brain. That is a natural arrangement made by the supreme order. For it is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that 4 social orders or castes, namely the Brahmanas, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Shudras, are set up according to quality and work done by them. Naturally, the son of a Brahmana has a good chance to become a Brahmana by the direction of his qualified father. As a son of a medical practitioner has a very good chance to become a qualified medical practitioner. So the caste system is quite scientific. The son must take advantage of the father's qualification and thus become a Brahmana or medical practitioner and not otherwise. Without being qualified, one cannot become a Brahmana or medical practitioner, and that is the verdict of all scriptures and social orders. Here in Shringi, a qualified son of a great Brahmana attained the required Brahmanical power both by birth and by training, but he was lacking in culture because he was an inexperienced boy. By the influence of Kali, the son of a Brahmana became puffed up with Brahmanical power and thus wrongly compared Maharaj Parikshit to crows and watchdogs. The king is certainly the watchdog of the state in the sense that he keeps vigilant eyes over the border of the state for its protection and defense. But to address him as a watchdog is the sign of a less cultured boy. Thus, the downfall of the Brahminical powers began as they gave importance to birthright without culture. The downfall of the Brahmana caste began in the age of Kali. And since Brahmanas are the heads of the social order, all other orders of society also began to deteriorate. This beginning of Brahminical deterioration was highly deplored by the father of Shringi, as we will find. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupah Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroh Shri Yutabadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamshta Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Mitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Badan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamshta Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashtatya Deshatarine Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratvishe Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyashta Kripa Sindubhya Evacha Patidanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Welcome all the devotees, both online and offline, for this morning Srimad Bhagavatam class of today. I'd like to seek the blessings of all the assembled devotees, especially senior devotees like Ram Bhakta Prabhu, for speaking something on this interesting verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So we're discussing from the first canto, 18th chapter, text number 33. So it's a very interesting section of the Bhagavatam, which is discussing the appearance of Bhagavatam itself. So generally scriptures, this is one of the beauty of our Vedic scriptures, that whichever scripture it may be it Ramayana or Bhagavatam or any other scripture, the given scripture discusses the advent of that particular scripture itself. So similarly here, we are finding Bhagavatam discusses the advent of Bhagavatam. So that is why it is very interesting. And all of us know the particular context which is going on, that Parikshit Maharaj was very thirsty once upon a time. He entered the ashram of Shamik Rishi. Shamik Rishi didn't respond. And therefore, Parikshit Maharaj got extremely angry. He took that dead snake with his bow and he placed it on the neck of Shamik Rishi and he went back to the kingdom. And in the meanwhile, this entire incident was witnessed by one of the friends of Shamik Rishi's son, who was known as Shringi. So he went and told the entire incident. Of course, that is not mentioned anywhere in the Bhagavatam. I've heard senior devotees say that how did Shringi come to know? Because one of his friends, this young friend, he was witnessing the entire incident and he went and told the entire incident to Shringi. So Shringi now is very, very angry. And his first reaction is in this verse. Text number 33 contains the first reaction of Shringi as soon as he came to know the offense that was committed by Parikshit Maharaj towards his father, that is Shamik Rishi. So generally, as preachers of Krishna consciousness in the outside world, especially from newcomers, we always get one question, that why do bad things happen to good people? Right? This is one of the most famous questions or most commonly asked questions to all preachers of Krishna consciousness. Why do bad things happen to good people? Right? Because in the backdrop of the question is that everybody thinks that I am good. Right? Others are all bad. So they want really to ask, why are bad things happening to me, and good things happening to others? That's a real question. But they cannot ask like that, right? So they camouflage the question and ask that why are bad things happening to good people? So good people, they just put it in a general box and they ask why are bad things happening to good people and good things happening to bad people, right? But anybody who goes through the even first few chapters of the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? Amazingly enough, this was a revelation I had from one of the senior devotees whom I was hearing just recently. Bhagavatam never discusses the law of karma, right? That forms the core of the Bhagavad Gita. The law of karma forms the core of the Bhagavad Gita, but Bhagavatam never discusses the law of karma. You will never find that great devotees are undergoing tribulations and Shukadeva Goswami is saying that this is because of their karma and the law of karma is acting so very well. Never will you find that in the Srimad Bhagavatam. In all the 12 cantos, the law of karma is never discussed. In fact, one who comes to study the Srimad Bhagavatam, he changes the very question for which he came to find the answer for. What was the question that he was asking in the beginning? Why are bad things happening to good people? But once he reads even a first few chapters of the Srimad Bhagavatam, he has to change the question itself. He has to ask not why bad things are happening to good people, but what good people do when bad things happen to them. Right? What do good people do? Not just good people or materially good people. What do great devotees do when, difficulties which are not imaginable to all of us also, right? They happen to them. What do good people do? Right? So the entire Srimad Bhagavatam is actually containing the responses of great devotees to the great difficulties that they faced in their own lives. So in the first canto itself, we see, right, Queen Kunti expressing her desire, then the Pandavas, then before that, Draupadi, in the case of Ashwathama, her response, right, even though that was such a great difficulty for her to see her own sons killed. And then finally, in the end of this first canto, we are finding Parikshit Maharaj's great difficulty and his response to that difficult situation that he faced. So Bhagavatam, there's therefore a very, very special scripture that contains the response of all of these great devotees, right? Because even though we might get to know, of course, it is not possible to get to know why we are facing this particular difficulty in our own lives, because the law of karma is so intricate, right? Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that Gahana Karmano Gatihi. That means nobody can be able to decipher which reaction is getting because of which action. Because sometimes it might happen that many actions together might bring in one reaction, or one action might get split into many reactions, right? So it is very, very intricate. But still, if somebody somehow or the other gets to know why he is facing this particular difficulty in his life, but still the difficulty has to face, right? The difficulty won't go away from there, right? So what to do during that difficulty is much more important than why I got that difficulty, right? And therefore Bhagavatam is teaching us what to do when great difficulties come in our own lives, right? So one senior devotee was saying that Bhagavatam is the only scripture, even in the Vedic paradigm, which teaches the art of dying. We are not interested in art of living. You can go somewhere else to learn that, but we are not interested in art of living. But it is the only scripture that teaches art of dying, because the backdrop of the entire scripture is the same thing, that Parikshit Maharaj is cursed to die within just 7 days, right? So how did he prepare for that death? That is the backdrop of the entire Bhagavatam, and we are discussing that particular incident right now. Anyways, in this particular verse, as I was saying, this particular verse contains the first reactions of Shringi. As soon as he came to know, he has just heard from a third source, right? He has not even seen the incident firsthand himself. He has just heard from a third source that Parikshit Maharaj, whom he very well knows, is the king of the entire world. Just like we all of us know the name of our prime minister, right? So similarly, everybody knows in the kingdom of Parikshit Maharaj that Parikshit Maharaj is the king of the entire world. Shri Radha Anil Madhav Bhagavan ki jai. So everybody knows. It is not the case that, Shringi doesn't know or is not aware that Parikshit Maharaj is the king of the entire world. He is completely aware. But he came to know about this incident, and the first reaction, he is, spelling out horrible, blasphemy on Parikshit Maharaj. Just look at the words that he is using in this verse. He's saying, oh, just look at the sins of the rulers who like crows and watchdogs at the door. Pivnam bali bhujam iva. Right? He is using horrible words to blaspheme the king just because of something that he has heard from a third source. Right? So, His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj, in many of his lectures, he says that the entire system of Varna and Ashrama, right? It is actually designed for one Varna to serve the other Varnas, and for one Ashrama to serve the other Ashramas. It is not designed for taking service, but it is designed for giving service, right? So, Maharaj was mentioning in one of his recent lectures that all of us were hearing in Brahmachari class, that wrongly many of us as neophyte devotees, as soon as we come to this Krishna conscious movement, when you are complete neophytes, that time we are ready to do anything, right? We are ready to serve how much ever need be. But over a period of time, that, desire for service, it, boils down, right? So at that point of time, the situation is that we understand the philosophy. We know the philosophy that, everybody is meant to serve. So what do we start thinking? We start thinking that we have to take service from others. Instead of giving service to others, we start thinking that we have to take service from others. So entire system of Varna and Ashrama, Atapumbir Dvijashreshta Varnashrama Vibhagashaha Swanushthitasya Dharmasya Samsiddhir Haritoshanam. It is meant for the service of Hari. And service of Hari does not happen directly. Service of Hari has to happen through the service of Vaishnavas. So Maharaj was saying that even before you understand the philosophy, the first point that we understand in the philosophy is that I am Dasa and others are Prabhu, right? So this point will never change. This point in the philosophy, even though you may go back to the spiritual world, this point would remain the same. So every Varna is meant for the service of other Varnas. A Brahmana is meant to serve the other three Varnas as well as other Brahmanas also. Similarly, a Kshatriya is meant to do the service of other three Varnas and other four Ashramas. So that when we forget, that time what happens is that we start expecting service instead of giving service. And that is a great danger. That actually led to the downfall of the Varna and Ashrama system. His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj was mentioning, because Brahmanas started expecting service from the other three castes. And when the Brahmanas fell down, because the leaders fell down, that's what Prabhupada is mentioning, the purport of this verse also. The downfall of the Brahmana caste began, and since Brahmanas are the heads of the social order, all other orders of society also began to deteriorate. So because Brahmanas are the heads, they fell down, everybody else also fell down. So here we see our Shringi. He's just a 5-year-old boy. Generally at 5 years old, everybody is quite innocent, right? They go and mingle with anybody and everybody. They are not well aware of the distinctions that they are there, or the, the different divisions are there in the society. There is a high class and the middle class and the low class. Children are not aware of that. They can go and mingle with anybody. But here we see a contrary situation over here, right? The Shringi has simply heard and he is ready to curse the king of the entire world. And Shringi is not an ordinary boy. Yesterday, Tamal Gopal was mentioning beautifully how he is not an ordinary boy. He has actually got a lot of power within him. At 5 years old, he has the power to curse the king, right? He is not an ordinary boy at all. So, in the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna discusses the birth of a living entity in the house of a Brahmana or in the house of a Vaishya, in the 6th chapter, he mentions Prapya Punya Kritam Lokan Ushitva Shashwati Samaha Shuchinam Shrimatam Gehe Yoga Bhrashtaha Abhijayate. He says that means one who has acquired a lot of pious devotional credits, not just pious credits. He says Bhaktyonmukha Sukriti. There's a difference between just material pious credits and devotional credits. So one who has a lot of devotional credits, he goes and lives in the, of course, if he is unsuccessful, he leaves the path thereafter. He takes to the devotional path and then he leaves the path. He goes and lives in the heavenly planetary systems for how long? Shashwati Samaha. Shashwati means, the Acharyas explain, Yavat Bhoga Samaptihi. That means till his material desires get vanquished in his heart. Till that time, he gets an opportunity to stay in the heavenly planetary systems. This is completely distinct from the another situation that Krishna mentions in the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. In the 9th chapter, when he discusses any normal living entity who can go to the heavenly planetary systems, he says, Kshine Punye Martya Lokam Vishanti. As soon as their pious credits get over, they have to come back to this world. But these two are different, right? One who has devotional credits and is unsuccessful on the devotional path, he goes to the heavenly planetary systems. And there is another who has pious credits, he goes to the heavenly planets. Both are completely different. Why? Because of the purpose of both of the personalities is completely different. And therefore, the other person, the second case, he has to come back immediately as soon as the pious credits get over. But this first person, he can get to stay there for as long as his material desires don't vanquish. And even after he comes back, what happens? Shuchinam Shrimatam Gehe. Shuchinam means in the house of Brahmanas. Shrimata means in the house of great merchants or Vaishyas. He can get his birth in this very favorable atmosphere, right? So the birth in the house of a Brahmana is not actually ordinary according to the Bhagavad Gita. It requires great devotional credits to actually take birth in the house of a Brahmana, right? It is not an ordinary birth at all. So recently I was hearing this beautiful conversation between Chaitanya Charan Prabhu and Kamal Lochan Prabhu on Monk's podcast, where Kamal Lochan Prabhu was mentioning that in order to decide the varna of a particular personality in this day and age, we need 3 factors that we need to take into consideration. He was saying, of course, the first one, what Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita, Guna and Karma is always there, right? The qualities and interest. So the qualities are manifested in the interest that a particular child shows, right? For example, a particular child may have a lot of interest for scriptural studies, or another might have a lot of interest in martial arts. Then we can guess. But this is not the only factor that is to be taken into consideration, he was saying. Why? Because many times what happens is that children's or personalities' interests vary over a period of time. You've seen that. Today I may have interest in studying scriptures, for example. Tomorrow I may get an interest in welding. So how will you decide whether I'm Brahmana or Shudra? Right? Because many times this happens, that interests vary over a period of time. So he said birth is also a criteria for deciding the varna of a particular person, because we cannot deny that a birth in a good family gives one particular person a lot of good samskaras, which makes him favorable for being a Brahmana or a Kshatriya or whatever he may be, right? A person taking the birth in the house of a welder, for example, he has a natural tendency for welding, right? So therefore, even in this verse, Prabhupada is mentioning the son of a medical practitioner. That means the son of a doctor. He has a very natural tendency to be a doctor. We cannot deny that. So there is the birth also that is to be taken into consideration. So there are the qualities or the interest. That is the first criteria. Second is the birth. And there is also the third criteria which he was mentioning is the birth chart. That means the horoscope, right? Why should we refer the horoscope for deciding the varna of a particular person? Just like all of you might be aware that in the Madhva Sampradaya, before anybody is given sannyas, because they are given sannyas at quite early age. Of course, these days they have banned the system of giving sannyas at the age of 8 years. You know, they say that it's just like child marriage is banned. Bala sannyasa is also banned. The Karnataka government banned it a few years ago. So now they are giving sannyas at the age of 20 to 25 years. So even that is quite early, right? Even that is quite early. But they never give sannyas to anybody without seeing the horoscope. Why should we see the horoscope? Because we need to know what is the role of Daiva in the Varna, right? Not just the person's interest. Is it approved by God himself in the form of Daiva, right? So when Krishna mentions 5 factors to be taken into consideration for every work to be successful, in the last chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Adhishtanam tadha karta karanam cha pratakvidham vividhashcha pratak cheshta daivam chaivatra panchamam. So daiva is the most important factor, he says, and therefore birth chart also should be taken into consideration. So all these factors together, they can decide a varna of a person fairly, maturely. Even then we cannot say fully, confidently that he belongs to this varna, because there is so much of varna sankara in Kali Yuga. That means the mixture of the varnas, mixture of the castes, but still we can get a fair idea with these 3 factors. So when we see Shringi, he has all the 3 factors under his belt, as they say in English. He has all the 3 advantages under his belt, right? He has a great birth. He has a great birth chart. Surely, sure enough, I have not seen his birth chart, but sure enough, he would have a great birth chart. And he has the qualities and interest to be a Brahmana also. And therefore, he is a qualified Brahmana. Therefore, Prabhupada is calling him as a qualified Brahmana. And therefore, he acquired such great power at such an early age. At just 5 years of age, he has the power to curse the king of the entire world. It's not an ordinary thing, right? So he has a great power. But as His Holiness Radhana Swami Maharaj says, that with great power should come great responsibility, right? This is the statement of Spider-Man, which Maharaj quotes again and again in his lectures. I don't know how many of you have seen Spider-Man, but Spider-Man in his movies always says again and again and again, because he has to fight great demons, and the demons are those who actually misuse their powers irresponsibly. So he always says that with great power has to come great responsibility. Of course, in the initial movies that Spider-Man they released, the statement was, with great power comes great responsibility, as if though it is understood that responsibility has to accompany power. But over a period of time, in the recent Spider-Man movies, they have changed the statement. What have they changed it to? With great power has to come great responsibility, because it may not be very much the case that great power always accompanies great responsibility, or great responsibility always accompanies great power, right? So with great power actually has to be great responsibility, otherwise it will lead to a great disaster. We have seen time and again in this world that great power actually leads to great disasters within this world. So with great power has to come great responsibility. Why? Because responsibility enables one to use the power properly. Without responsibility, he will irresponsibly use the power against anybody and everybody, right? So great responsibility enables one to use the great power in a proper manner. And amazingly enough, if the power is not accompanied with responsibility, automatically the power will be accompanied with pride, right? Power always leads to pride, and that pride is what that enforces one to misuse that power, right? So in the Varnashrama system, amazingly, in the first 5 to 10 years that the child was in Gurukul, they never used to invest their energies. The teachers never used to invest their energies in teaching the child skills, right? The first 5 to 10 years that he was in Gurukul, he was always taught the proper Vaishnava qualities. This is what I was hearing from His Holiness Bhakti Vidyapurna Swami Maharaj. In his Gurukul in Mayapur, he uses this system. The first 5 to 10 years in the Gurukul, they are never taught skills, be it Kshatriya skills or Brahmana skills or whatever. They always taught proper Vaishnava qualities. And thereafter, when they are taught skills, that time they know how to use the skills in a proper manner, right? Otherwise, they are given skills. Just like, for example, a young child, suppose he is taught Sanskrit at a very young age. Of course, Sanskrit has to be taught at a very young age. But if he is given all the knowledge, which a child may not, deserve to be given at such a young age, at that point of time, what will happen? He might start thinking that, I am better than my guru also, right? Because children have the capacity to learn a lot in a very short span of time. So at that point of time, what will happen is that he will start thinking that I am better than my guru, so I don't need my guru. I will just kick my guru off and I will start my own gurukul after some time. Right? He might start thinking like that. So responsibility, if it is not accompanying power, surely pride will accompany the power. And so pride is a great disaster to the power that any person possesses. So it is said that a person, if he has to be prevented from wrongdoing, there are two things which generally prevents one from doing anything wrong. Just like in the Mahabharata, we have seen that example of the Kauravas, where in the game of dice, they went to great lengths. There was no lengths to which the Kauravas did not take to disrobe Draupadi, or to belittle the Pandavas or anything. Right? So in that particular instance, His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu mentions that there are two factors to be taken to consideration, or there are two things which actually prevents one from wrongdoing. What are they? First is the power of conscience. He says conscience is actually nothing but the voice of the Paramatma, right? English, they generally say conscience as though it is a non-living entity, but all of us as Vedic followers were very clear that it is the voice of the Paramatma, right? So the first time anybody does a mistake, the Paramatma shouts very loud that this is a mistake that you're doing. This is the great mistake that you're doing. But suppose he does not pay heed to that particular call of the Paramatma, the second time what will happen? The shout of the Paramatma will be a little more feeble, right? It won't be the same voice, because Paramatma is a person. Just like parents, they correct the child. The first time they have to correct a child, it is a very, very, strong chastisement that they give to the son or the daughter, right? The second time, if the daughter or the son repeats the same mistake, it won't be that strong, right? Why? Because they are persons themselves. They cannot say, they continue to correct the child again and again. So the voice of the Paramatma dwindles and, becomes more and more feeble over a period of time. So for those who do not heed to the power of conscience, that means for those who do not heed to the power of to the voice of the Paramatma, for them, what can work is the fear of consequence. He says, either the power of conscience can prevent one from wrongdoing, or the fear of consequence. That means consequence means what will happen if I do this wrong activity. One begins to ponder over what will happen if I begin to do this wrong activity. That is the fear of consequence. So in this particular incident, if we see Shringi, it was not that he didn't have any conscience, right? Because in the later few verses, we see that as soon as he gave that curse, as soon as he spelt out that curse, what happens? He starts crying. That verse will come just in a few verses from now. He starts crying. Somebody who doesn't have conscience, for they will never cry after they do the wrong activity also, right? Just like the Kauravas, after they disrobed Draupadi, they never cried, right? They were in fact thinking that, we were unsuccessful in the attempt, right? They were thinking like that. So Shringi, he has the power of conscience, right? The power of conscience is working within him. But unfortunately, the fear of consequence, that is not there in Shringi. Why? Because he is not yet cultured. He doesn't have the experience to deal with actual life incidents, as Prabhupada is mentioning over here. He was less cultured. Why? Because he was less experienced in the world. So Prabhupada says in one of his lectures that the pride that Shringi had within his heart, that eclipsed both the power of conscience as well as the fear of consequence. So that is the reason why pride is so dangerous. Prabhupada was mentioning in this verse, in this lecture that I was hearing. So in English, there is one very popular statement that when we have a nail, right? Just see if you can understand the meaning of this statement. We have a nail. When we have a nail, every tool that comes to our hand seems like a hammer. Understand what it means? When we have a nail, everything that comes to our hand seems like a hammer. What does that mean? Anybody like to explain? When we have a nail, everything that comes to our hand acts like a hammer. What does that mean? Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah. Yes, Bruce. Thank you. Yeah. Exploitative behavior. So, when we have a nail, we are always thinking of how to hammer the nail. So, similarly, somebody who has power is waiting for an opportunity to use that power. That's what it means actually. Somebody who has power, he will not simply sit quiet without using that power. He is waiting for an opportunity to put that power into action. Just like if I give a machine gun to somebody and I tell him this is fully loaded, but don't fire. Will he sit quiet without firing? Once one senior devotee, Raman Pro in Pune, was telling us that, once a pilot, I don't know if this might be, this should be a hypothetical story, I guess. Once a pilot, before he boarded the plane, he was told, I guess it was a helicopter. Yeah. Before he boarded the helicopter, he was told, don't press this red button over here. Especially when you are overboard, right? When you are flying in the air, you should never press the red button. What do you think? Did he press or did he not press? Did he end up pressing or not pressing? Sure enough, he pressed that red button, right? So, when we have some power with us, we are always waiting for an opportunity to use the power. And the first instance that we get that opportunity, we will never, let that opportunity let go from our hands, right? So, similarly, here we see Shringi has great power, but he has never put that power into action, right? And therefore, he is waiting for that opportunity to put that power into action. And the first instance he saw that Parikshit Maharaj has committed an offense to my father, and he did put that power into action, right? So a few years ago, I was seeing this documentary of how one police officer's son, a Maharashtrian police officer's son, he shot himself with the gun of his father. What happened was that one fine day, this police officer came back home, and every day it was the case that after coming back home, he used to remove the cartridge from his rifle, from his pistol, and used to keep the pistol there, right? But this day, he thought that every day I do it anyway, right? So why should I do it again today? Anyway, nothing is going to happen. He just assumed that nothing is going to happen, and he simply kept the rifle, the fully loaded gun, right? Fully loaded pistol on the shelf without, removing the cartridge, right? So, and he went to talk with the mother, and he didn't come back for a long time. And this child who was in the same room, right? He thought that it is a toy gun, right? He was simply some 3 or 4 years old, and he thought that I will experiment it. And the first experiment he did on himself. He took the gun and he pulled the trigger, right? He pulled the trigger, and that is how that was the end of that child. So, police officer, he's a powerful person, right? So similarly, here we see Shamik Rishi is a powerful person, and the child of the police officer was immature how to handle that rifle. And similarly, here we see Shringi has great powers which has been given by the father, Shamik Rishi, but Shringi is immature to handle that power. Gun is a very powerful instrument, right? It can kill a living entity, right? Just one shot, and one shot will not even take a few seconds, right? It might take 1 second, that's it, not more than a second. And that can lead to a living entity getting killed. So similarly, here we are seeing Shringi has great powers. Just like that child has the rifle, this child of Shamik Rishi has the great power to curse, and he's putting that into action. So I'll just end with 2 more points. That so what I was wanting to say is that Shamik Rishi's son Shringi was quite immature to handle that power that he had. So similarly, all of us also need to ponder within ourselves. We have been given many gadgets, and we have been given many, many comforts, be it in the brahmacharya ashrama or the grihastha ashrama. So, but we may not be mature enough to handle them. Just like a mobile phone, right? In these days, we get everything within the phone, right? A smartphone, everything is available on the smartphone. So we need to ponder within ourselves whether we are mature enough to handle that particular, gadget or any facility that we are being given. It might be a mobile phone or a laptop or any facility that we are given, right? It requires enough maturity to handle that particular facility. Otherwise, it is better not to take that facility at all, right? So those who don't have facilities, they'll be always be craving for those facilities without wanting to know whether they have the maturity to handle those facilities, right? Those who are mature, on the other hand, they may not want the facilities at all, right? In English, there is a statement that the irony of the world is that fools are confident while wise are doubtful. I've heard this statement, very famous statement. The irony of the world is that fools are confident while wise are doubtful. Just like a normal college going boy, he is always thinking that if I go to America, then I'll be very, very happy, right? But all of us, we are chanting every day, and we are, meditating whether, the spiritual world exists. Chanting, will this work or not? We are meditating like that. We are doubtful, right? So similarly, those who are actually mature enough, they deny facilities, but they are forcefully given facilities. Why? Because they know how the facilities need to be used, right? That's why they say that a sannyasi is one who denies all facilities, but they are forcefully given to that particular person, because sannyasi knows exactly how to use them in the service of Krishna. But another materially attached person, we should never give them facilities. Why? Because they will get carried away by those facilities. So here we see that Shringi is getting carried away by the facility that he has. And even without, cross-checking or even without verifying what the incident was, and even if the incident was true, what prompted Parikshit Maharaj to do that particular activity of placing the dead snake on the neck of Shamik Rishi, even without cross-verifying that, he is taking the dangerous step of cursing the king of the entire world. And subsequent verses will see actually how he himself regretted that, and his father also regretted this particular curse, right? He's not even thinking about the particular person's position before cursing. Just like a chief minister of a state or a prime minister of a country, if he does something wrong, he cannot be put through a normal trial process, right? There is always a special trial process for them, right? A chief minister, if he does something wrong, there is a special trial process to put him under trial. So similarly here, Parikshit Maharaj is the king of the entire world. So Shringi is not even thinking that Parikshit Maharaj, as the king of the entire world, he deserves a special trial, even if he has done something wrong. He's not even thinking about that. He's directly going ahead to curse Parikshit Maharaj. So this was a great wrong that he committed. But still, the way Parikshit Maharaj took that incident is greatly instructive. Right? In the next chapter, that verse comes of how Parikshit Maharaj received that curse. Tasyaiva meghasya paravaresho vyasatta chittasya griheshvabhikshnam nirveda mulo dvijashapa rupo yatra prasakto bhayamashu dhatte, he says. Because I was so very attached to my household affairs. Therefore, Krishna has designed the entire situation in which I can get nirveda. That means I can gradually get detached. Not just gradually, it happened overnight, right? Overnight, I got detached from the family affairs, and now I can sit on the banks of Ganges and I can hear the Srimad Bhagavatam. So ultimately, it was all a design of Krishna. But in the design of Krishna, there are many lessons to learn also, because all the individuals have their roles to play. Just like somebody was asking that, the Muslims invading India and the, Britishers invading India, all did it happen through the, design of Krishna? Is it the design of Krishna that all this happened? Yes, it is a design of Krishna. But you cannot, ignore the irresponsibility of the rulers who didn't protect, India from all this, right? You cannot ignore that, right? So similarly, it might be a design of Krishna in the big picture, but within the big picture, there is the small picture that each individual has a role to play within that big picture. And therefore, here we see that Shringi, what he did, was it the design of Krishna? Was it the, was there the hand of Krishna within that? Definitely there was there, but we cannot ignore the mistake of Shringi himself, right? So as long as we don't use our facilities properly, His Holiness Radharana Swami Maharaj says on the lectures that he has given on this chapter, he says that all of us, we should know that we are also acting like Shringis, because Shringi had a great facility, but he didn't use it properly. He misutilized it. Similarly, all of us, we should know that we are also acting as Shringis. So with that, I would like to conclude today's lecture. I would like to thank everybody, both online and offline, for patiently hearing today's Shrimad Bhagavatam class. If there is any question or any point to be said, we can take that question. Yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
That is not a question about the class, I guess. Okay, fine. So, okay, let me tell it here in the public forum that, okay, let me repeat the question. The question by Tukaram Prabhu is that, why are we speaking in English today morning? We could have spoken in Kannada, in which many devotees, more devotees would have understood properly, but still we are choosing English. Why are we chosen English? That is the question. So the answer to that question is that His Grace Sadai Prabhu has told all of us that we will have 2 lectures in Kannada every week. Every week, 2 Bhagavatam classes will be in Kannada and 2 will also be in English. Why? Because there is quite a few non-Hindi audience also. Within the temple itself, there are few devotees like Sadai Prabhu, Adi Bhagavan Prabhu, and few of the students, whenever they attend, they can't understand Kannada, unfortunately. And in the congregation also, there are a few. Just like Aarti Mataji, who is very, very regular in the Bhagavatam class. She may not be able to understand Kannada. So 2 English classes and 2 Kannada. And if there might be some weeks where there is only 1 English class also, apart from the Prabhupada's class I'm mentioning, not including Prabhupada's class. There might be only 1 Kannada class. So, and we'll try to maximize the number of Hindi classes, maybe 3 Hindi classes in a week, so that everybody will get to understand. So 3 to 2, that will be the ratio. 7 days and 3 to 2. That should be fine, I guess. Okay, any other question? No, no? Okay, fine. Thank you very much, everybody. Hare Krishna. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.